I'm Lauren, 62 years old, and last month I stood at my husband Richard's funeral, wondering how my life would change. I never imagined my own daughter Amanda would be the one to break my heart. After 40 years of marriage, she inherited our house and $33 million. Then came those words I'll never forget. Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now. But 3 days later, everything changed when our lawyer laughed and asked her, "Did you even read the will?" Before I tell you how my own daughter threw me out of my home after 40 years, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this story ends. Richard and I were married for 40 beautiful years before cancer took him from us. We met in college, where he was studying business and I was pursuing education. He was the ambitious one with big dreams, and I was the steady one who believed in those dreams. Our connection was immediate, his confidence balanced by my practicality. We married young, just 22, with nothing but hope and student loans. Building our life together wasn't easy. We struggled financially at first, living in a tiny apartment, while Richard worked to establish his first business venture, a small consulting firm that advised local businesses on efficiency. I taught at the elementary school, 6 blocks from our apartment, and every penny I earned went into supporting his dream. That was our agreement. I would help build his vision, and we would share in the rewards together. For years, we tried to have children. The disappointment each month was crushing, but Richard never wavered in his support. "Lauren," he would say, holding me close, "if it's just you and me forever, that's more than enough." Through 3 miscarriages and countless doctor appointments, we held on to each other, our marriage growing stronger through the pain. When I turned 38, we had almost given up hope of becoming parents. Then the miracle happened. I got pregnant with Amanda, and this time everything progressed normally. I still remember Richard's face when he first held her, our little miracle baby with her father's sharp blue eyes and my auburn hair. "Everything I've built," he whispered, "now has its purpose." By then, Richard's business had grown substantially. What started as a small consulting operation had expanded into Bradford Enterprises, a company that specialized in turning around failing businesses. Richard had a talent for seeing potential where others saw only failure, and his reputation grew nationally. We moved from our modest apartment to a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood where Amanda would have the best of everything. When Amanda was born, we made a decision together. With Richard's business thriving, I would leave my teaching career to raise our daughter full-time. It wasn't an easy choice. I loved teaching, but we both wanted to give Amanda the attention and care we dreamed of providing to our child for so long. Richard promised me, "This is our joint venture, Lauren. Your work raising our daughter is just as valuable as mine building the business." Amanda had advantages I could only have dreamed of as a child. Private school education, from kindergarten piano lessons with renowned instructors, summer programs abroad, horseback riding lessons, and a wardrobe that would make most adults envious. Richard and I agreed that we wanted to give her every opportunity, though sometimes I worried we were giving her too much too easily. "She needs to learn the value of hard work," I would tell Richard, but he would just smile and say, "There's time for that later. Let her be a kid now." As Amanda grew into her teenage years, I noticed a changing dynamic between her and Richard. She idolized her father, hanging on his every word about business and success. Meanwhile, our mother-daughter relationship became more strained. The woman who packed her lunches, helped with homework, and nursed her through illness became increasingly invisible to her. I told myself this was normal. Many daughters go through phases of distance from their mothers. Amanda attended an Ivy League university, majoring in business like her father. After graduation, she moved to New York to work for a prestigious investment firm, visiting home only on major holidays. Those visits became shorter each year, with Amanda spending most of her time talking business with Richard, rather than engaging with both of us as a family. 5 years ago, Richard was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The prognosis wasn't good from the beginning, but we fought it together. I became his primary caretaker, managing medications, driving to appointments, researching experimental treatments, and providing the emotional support he needed through the darkest days. Amanda called occasionally, but rarely visited, always citing work commitments. "The business world doesn't stop for personal issues," she would say, echoing phrases I'd heard from Richard in his younger, more driven days. During Richard's final months, I rarely left his side. I slept in a chair beside our bed, administered his pain medication read to him when he couldn't sleep, and held his hand through the worst of the pain. Amanda visited twice during those 6 months, staying less than 48 hours each time. Richard never complained about her absence, but I saw the disappointment in his eyes when he'd ask about her, and I'd have to make excuses. Richard passed away peacefully in his sleep with me holding his hand. I called Amanda immediately, and she said she'd fly in for the funeral. When she arrived the next day, there were no tears, just questions about the will and the business. I was too grief-stricken to be angry, telling myself everyone processes loss differently. The funeral was a grand affair. Richard was well respected in the business community, and hundreds attended. Amanda stood beside me, dry-eyed and poised in an expensive black dress, accepting condolences with practiced grace. I sobbed openly, 40 years of love and partnership impossible to contain in dignified grief. Amanda whispered at one point, "Mother, please try to control yourself. Dad wouldn't want a spectacle." Her words stung, but I chalked it up to different grieving styles. Little did I know that the funeral was just the beginning of my ordeal, and that the daughter I'd sacrificed so much for was about to show me exactly how little those sacrifices had meant to her. 3 days after the funeral, we gathered at the office of Thomas Parker, our family attorney and Richard's close friend for over 30 years. Thomas had been there for all the major milestones in our lives, from drafting our first business contracts to creating Amanda's trust fund when she was born. His office was familiar territory, a place of safety and sound advice through the decades. I sat in the leather chair beside Amanda, my hands folded in my lap, still wearing my wedding ring and the simple pearl necklace Richard had given me on our first anniversary. Amanda was dressed in a sleek business suit, her phone buzzing with messages she repeatedly checked throughout Thomas's preliminary remarks about Richard's character and legacy. "Richard Bradford was not just my client, but one of my dearest friends." Thomas began, his voice heavy with genuine emotion. "The estate we're discussing today represents not just financial assets, but the life's work of a man who built everything from nothing with integrity and vision." Amanda straightened in her chair. "Thomas, I have a flight back to New York this evening. Could we perhaps move to the specifics?" Her tone was polite but firm, the voice she likely used in boardrooms to redirect meandering discussions. Thomas adjusted his glasses and opened the thick folder on his desk. "Very well. To the matter at hand. Richard's estate is substantial, as you both know. Bradford Enterprises has been handled according to the succession plan put in place 5 years ago when Richard first received his diagnosis." I nodded. Richard had discussed this with me extensively, how the company leadership would transition with his most trusted executives taking control. He'd always said the company should be run by those with the passion and expertise to take it forward, not simply passed down as a family heirloom. "Now to the personal estate," Thomas continued. "The total value, including liquid assets, property, and investments, amounts to approximately $33 million, plus the family home valued at $4.2 million. I gasped softly. I knew Richard had been successful, but he'd always handled the finances, and I'd never asked for specifics. The number was staggering to me, a former school teacher who still compared prices at the grocery store. Thomas cleared his throat. "The primary residence and the bulk of the liquid assets amounting to $33 million will pass to Amanda Bradford." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to process the information. Beside me, Amanda's posture changed, a subtle straightening of her spine, a slight lift of her chin. "There are, however, additional provisions regarding," Thomas began, but Amanda interrupted. "So the house and 33 million are mine effective immediately." Her voice had a new edge to it, crisp, authoritative. Thomas looked uncomfortable. "Well, yes, technically, but there are important conditions that—" Amanda stood up, smoothing her skirt. "I'd like copies of all the relevant documentation, please. I'll have my financial team review everything." "Amanda, please sit down." Thomas said, his tone firmer than I'd ever heard him use with her. "There's more we need to discuss about your mother's—" "I'm sure anything else can be handled by our respective legal teams," Amanda said, glancing at her watch. "Mother doesn't have representation here today, and I wouldn't want any decisions made without proper counsel present. Best to adjourn and reconvene when everyone has had time to review the documents independently." Thomas looked at me, a question in his eyes. Still reeling from the shock, I simply nodded, unable to find words. "Very well," Thomas conceded reluctantly. "But Lauren, I strongly suggest we speak privately at your earliest convenience. There are matters specifically pertaining to your situation that require immediate attention." "Of course," I murmured, gathering my purse with trembling hands. Amanda was already on her phone as we walked to the car, speaking rapidly to someone about the Bradford property and liquidating certain assets. The drive home passed in silence between us, though Amanda made several more calls discussing financial matters in terminology I barely understood. That evening in our home, apparently now Amanda's home, was surreal. Amanda walked through the rooms with a notepad, making occasional notes and taking photos. "I'm thinking this space could be opened up," she said casually in the living room where Richard and I had spent thousands of evenings together. "The kitchen needs a complete renovation, of course, and this furniture is all dated." I watched in stunned silence as she effectively erased 4 decades of our life together, with casual commentary about square footage and design trends. That night, I lay awake in the bedroom I'd shared with Richard, listening to Amanda's footsteps in his home office down the hall. I heard drawers opening and closing, papers rustling. Around 2 a.m, I got up to check on her, finding her at Richard's desk with stacks of documents spread out before her. "Amanda, it's late. Can't this wait until morning?" I asked gently. She looked up, and for a moment, I didn't recognize the cold calculation in my daughter's eyes. "You should get some rest, Mother. Tomorrow will be a busy day." The next morning over coffee, which I made while Amanda took a business call on the patio, everything changed. Amanda entered the kitchen as I was washing my cup, her posture rigid, her expression set. "Mother, we need to discuss the living arrangements," she began without preamble. "What do you mean?" I asked, drying my hands on a dish towel embroidered with an R&L that had been a gift from Richard's mother decades ago. "This house is now legally mine," Amanda said, her voice clinically detached. "I'll be renovating extensively before putting it on the market. Having you here during that process would be complicated." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. "Amanda, this is my home. Where would I go?" "You must have friends you could stay with temporarily," she replied with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Or perhaps consider one of those retirement communities. I hear some of them are quite nice." "Retirement community, Amanda? I'm only 62, and your father and I built this life together. Everything here was left to me," she cut in sharply. "Dad clearly wanted me to have the house and the money. He knew I would make better use of it than you would." The cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. "Amanda, how can you say that I was with your father for 40 years? I gave up my career to raise you. This has been my only home for 35 years. Her expression hardened further. "Let's be realistic, Mother. You were a kindergarten teacher for 5 years. Dad was the one who built everything we have. You just enjoyed the benefits." Tears filled my eyes. I can't believe you see our family that way. Your father and I were partners in everything. Partners? Amanda laughed, a cold sound I'd never heard from her before. Dad was a business genius who built a multi-million-dollar enterprise. You packed lunches and attended PTA meetings, hardly equal contributions. I felt physically ill, my hand clutching the counter for support. Where is this coming from? I'm your mother, Amanda. She checked her watch impatiently. The fact is, I need you out of here by the end of the week. The contractors start on Monday, and the real estate agent is coming tomorrow to discuss staging. The end of the week, Amanda. That's impossible. Where would I go? What would I live on? Panic rose in my chest as the reality of my situation began to sink in. That's not really my problem, is it? She replied coldly. Dad left everything to me, not you. Perhaps you should have planned better for your future instead of assuming he'd take care of everything. I could barely speak through my shock and hurt. How can you do this to me? Amanda gathered her things, sliding her phone into her expensive handbag. I'll give you 48 hours to pack your essentials. Anything you leave behind will be considered abandoned property. As she headed toward the door, I found my voice again. Amanda, please. I'm your mother. I have nowhere to go. She turned back, and the words she spoke next will haunt me forever. Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now. The door closed behind her, leaving me alone in the sudden silence of the home that was no longer mine, with the devastating knowledge that the baby I'd carried, the child I'd raised, the daughter I'd loved unconditionally for 24 years, saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience to be discarded. I don't remember much about the next few hours after Amanda delivered her cruel ultimatum. I sat at the kitchen table, the same oak table where I'd helped Amanda with her homework, where Richard and I had shared thousands of meals, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays for decades, and stared into space, trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly turned upside down. Eventually, I forced myself to move. With trembling hands, I pulled out the old suitcases from the hall closet, the matched set Richard had bought for our 20th anniversary trip to Europe. How could I possibly condense 40 years of life into a few bags? What would I take? What would I leave behind forever? I started in our bedroom. My bedroom now, though, soon to be neither of ours. The closet still held Richard's clothes. I hadn't been able to part with them yet. I ran my fingers over his suits, brought one of his sweaters to my face to see if his scent still lingered. It didn't. Just the faint smell of cedar from the closet organizers we'd installed together 10 years ago. My own clothes filled the other side, not nearly as numerous or expensive as Amanda's wardrobe, but carefully chosen pieces I'd accumulated over the years. I pulled out practical items: jeans, sweaters, sensible shoes, leaving behind cocktail dresses and formal wear. Where would I wear those now? To the retirement home Amanda thought I should shuffle off to. In the bathroom. I gathered my toiletries, leaving behind the expensive face creams and perfumes Richard had always given me for Christmas. They suddenly seemed like artifacts from another woman's life. The real heartbreak came when I started looking through our personal items. 40 years of photographs, letters, and mementos. Our wedding album. Amanda's baby book that I'd so carefully filled out, recording her first words, first steps, first everything. The handmade Mother's Day cards she'd given me as a child before designer gifts replaced heartfelt creations. I found a small box containing the clay handprint Amanda had made in kindergarten. I'd kept it all these years, this tangible connection to the tiny hand that had once reached for mine so trustingly. Now that same hand was showing me the door. One photo stopped me completely. Richard holding newborn Amanda in the hospital, looking at her with such wonder and love. I sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching the frame, remembering how we'd both cried with joy that day. Where had that joy gone? How had we raised a daughter who could turn so cold? I thought back to the sacrifices we'd made, especially mine. I had left a teaching career I loved to raise Amanda full-time. At Richard's encouragement, I'd poured everything into being the best mother I could be. I drove her to endless activities, volunteered at her school, helped with homework, nursed her through illnesses, celebrated her triumphs, and comforted her through disappointments. When had things changed? Was it the expensive private school where most children came from wealthy families? Was it the constant gifts and privileges Richard showered on her? Was it the subtle message that money could solve any problem? Or was it simply that Amanda had her father's ambition, but none of his heart? By evening, I had filled 3 suitcases with clothing and personal items I couldn't bear to part with. Everything else, the furniture we'd chosen together, the art we'd collected on trips, the kitchen gadgets I'd used to cook thousands of family meals, would stay behind. Amanda would probably discard most of it during her renovations. I needed to find somewhere to go. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and scrolled through contacts. Who could I possibly ask for help at my age? Most of our friends were couples, Richard's business associates and their wives. Would they even take my calls now that Richard was gone? Would they choose sides? I finally called Patty Moore, my closest friend since Amanda started kindergarten. Our daughters had been friends before Amanda moved away. Unlike many in our social circle, Patty had always been genuine, a widow herself who understood loss. "Lauren, honey, how are you holding up?" Patty's warm voice was like a lifeline. "Not well, Patty." I admitted, my voice breaking. "Something terrible has happened." I explained the situation through tears and lengthy pauses when emotion overwhelmed me. Patty listened without interrupting, occasionally making sounds of disbelief and outrage. "That can't be legal," she said when I finished. "Richard wouldn't leave you with nothing after 40 years. The house and money are Amanda's. I heard it myself," I said, exhaustion evident in my voice. "Well, you're coming to stay with me," Patty declared without hesitation. "I have the spare bedroom since Kevin moved out. It's not fancy, but it's yours for as long as you need it." Relief flooded through me. "Are you sure I don't know how long it would be?" "Lauren Bradford, how many times did you help me after Jim died? How many casseroles and listening sessions and emergency babysitting nights? You're staying with me, and that's final. I'll pick you up tomorrow afternoon." That night was my last in the house Richard and I had shared for 35 years. I walked through each room, touching familiar objects, saying goodbye to the space where we had built our life together. In our bedroom, I lay on Richard's side of the bed, trying to imagine what he would say if he knew what was happening. Morning came too quickly. I heard Amanda moving around downstairs, making business calls in a bright professional voice that contrasted sharply with the cold tone she used with me. I delayed going down as long as possible, but eventually hunger drove me to the kitchen. Amanda was dressed in another expensive suit, laptop open at the kitchen island. She glanced up as I entered. "Have you made arrangements?" No good morning. No how did you sleep. Just cold practicality from the baby I had nursed at my breast. "Yes," I said quietly. "My friend Patty is coming this afternoon to get me." Amanda nodded briskly. "Good. The real estate agent will be here at 2. You should be gone by then." I made toast I couldn't eat and coffee that tasted like nothing. Amanda continued working occasionally, making remarks into her phone about potential ROI and market positioning. Patty arrived at noon, her ancient station wagon, a stark contrast to the luxury vehicles in our circular driveway. She hugged me fiercely before helping load my suitcases. Amanda emerged from the house as we finished, her expression impassive. "Is that everything you're taking?" "Yes," I said, looking at the pathetically small pile of luggage that represented what remained of my life here. "I'll need your house keys," she said, holding out her hand. 40 years of marriage, 24 years of motherhood, reduced to a key handover in a driveway. I unclipped the house key from my keyring the key to the home Richard and I had purchased when I was pregnant with Amanda. I placed it in her palm without a word. "The security code will be changed this afternoon," Amanda said, pocketing the key. "If you've forgotten anything important, email my assistant to arrange a time to collect it." I looked at my daughter, this stranger wearing Amanda's face, and felt a profound grief deeper than even Richard's death had caused. "Goodbye, Amanda." She was already walking back to the house phone to her ear, not bothering to respond. Patty's hand on my shoulder guided me to the passenger seat of her car. As we pulled away, I allowed myself one look back at the colonial-style house with its manicured lawn and the rose garden I had tended for decades. The for sale sign would probably go up next week. "I can't believe she's doing this," Patty fumed as we drove. "Richard would never have wanted this." "I don't understand what happened to her," I whispered, watching my home, my life, disappear in the side mirror. Patty's apartment was in a modest complex across town, comfortable but small, especially compared to the spacious home I'd just left. The spare bedroom was tidy but basic with a twin bed and a small dresser. "It's not much," Patty apologized as she helped me unpack. "It's everything," I corrected her, overcome with gratitude. "You've saved me, Patty." That night, after Patty had gone to bed, I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar mattress and finally allowed myself to fully break down. I sobbed into a pillow to muffle the sound, grieving not just for Richard now, but for the daughter I thought I knew, for the life I had lost, and for the uncertain future ahead of me at 62 years old, with no home, no income, and no plan. How had I gone from being Lauren Bradford, wife of a successful businessman and mother of a brilliant daughter, to a homeless widow with 3 suitcases to her name? And what would I do now? For 3 days, I moved through Patty's apartment like a ghost. I slept fitfully, ate little, and spent hours staring out the window at an unfamiliar view. Patty tried her best to comfort me, but there was no consolation for the twin losses of my husband and my daughter's love. On the morning of the 4th day, my phone rang. The screen showed Thomas Parker, our family attorney. My first instinct was to ignore it. What more could he possibly have to tell me? But Patty, bringing me tea, saw the name and insisted. "You need to answer that, Lauren. Thomas has been your attorney for decades. Maybe he has news." With reluctance, I accepted the call. "Hello, Thomas?" "Lauren, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days." Thomas's voice was urgent. "Where are you? Are you all right?" "I'm staying with my friend Patty Moore," I replied dully. "Amanda asked me to leave the house." There was a long silence, then Thomas said something I never expected. "Lauren, we need to meet immediately. There's been a serious misunderstanding about Richard's will." A flicker of something, not quite hope but perhaps curiosity, stirred within me. "What kind of misunderstanding?" "Not over the phone," Thomas insisted. "Can you meet me at Riverside Cafe in an hour? It's important." After hanging up, I found myself moving with purpose for the first time in days. I showered, dressed in one of the few decent outfits I'd packed, and applied minimal makeup to hide the evidence of sleepless nights. "Want me to come with you?" Patty offered, car keys already in hand. I considered it, then shook my head. "I need to do this alone. But thank you, Patty, for everything." The Riverside Cafe was a quiet place on the edge of town where Richard and Thomas had often met for lunch. It felt strange to be there without Richard sliding into a corner booth across from Thomas, who rose to greet me with concern evident on his face. "Lauren, I am so sorry about what's happened," he began, signaling the waitress for coffee. "I had no idea Amanda would act this way. If I'd known, she would prevent me from explaining the full terms of the will." "What do you mean, full terms?" I asked, wrapping cold fingers around the warm coffee mug the waitress placed before me. Thomas removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose in frustration. Amanda cut me off during the reading before I could explain the most important provisions Richard made for you. She specifically blocked me from meeting with you privately afterward, and then you disappeared before I could reach you. Important provisions? I echoed, confusion giving way to the first stirrings of hope. But you said the house and money went to Amanda. Thomas leaned forward, voice low and intense. Yes, but with significant conditions attached. Richard was a brilliant businessman, Lauren. He understood people, including his own daughter. He anticipated something like this might happen. My heart began to pound. What exactly did Richard do? The $33 million and the house weren't left to Amanda outright, Thomas explained. They were placed in a trust with very specific conditions. One of the primary conditions is that you retain lifetime residency rights to the family home regardless of ownership. Amanda cannot legally evict you or sell the house without providing you with equivalent accommodations that meet your approval. I stared at him in disbelief. But she's already talking to real estate agents. Without legal authority, Thomas said firmly. Additionally, the trust stipulates that Amanda must demonstrate respect and care befitting a daughter to her mother, Richard's exact words, or risk forfeiting control of the assets. What does that mean exactly? I asked, hardly daring to breathe. It means, Lauren, that by evicting you from your home, Amanda has already violated the terms of the trust. If this situation isn't rectified immediately, the entire inheritance transfers to Richard's designated backup beneficiary, the Children's Cancer Research Foundation he supported after Amanda's childhood friend died of leukemia. I sat back stunned. All of it, the entire $33 million? Thomas nodded, a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. All of it. Richard built a successful business by always having contingency plans. He clearly had concerns about how Amanda might behave once he was gone. But why didn't you stop her during the will reading? I asked, still trying to process this revelation. Thomas looked genuinely regretful. I tried, Lauren, but Amanda cut me off repeatedly, then rushed you out. She had her own lawyers call me afterward, insisting all communication go through them. By the time I realized you'd actually been evicted, you were gone. He paused, then asked quietly, Did you ever read the full will yourself, Lauren? I shook my head, embarrassed. No, Amanda said she would have her legal team review everything. Thomas actually laughed, though not unkindly. I'm not surprised she didn't want you to see it. The provisions protecting you are quite extensive. He pulled a thick document from his briefcase and slid it across the table. This is your copy. You should have had it days ago. As I flipped through the pages, seeing Richard's careful provisions for my well-being, tears filled my eyes. Even from beyond the grave, he was still taking care of me, still anticipating problems and solving them. There's more, Thomas said gently. Richard left you a personal letter explaining his decisions. Amanda doesn't know about it. He produced a sealed envelope with my name written in Richard's distinctive handwriting. My fingers trembled as I took it. I can't read this here, I whispered, tucking it into my purse for later. Understandable. Thomas nodded. But there's one more thing you should know now. Richard recorded a video message to be played in exactly this situation. If Amanda contested your rights or attempted to remove you from the home, he asked me to preserve it as evidence. A video? I repeated, amazed at Richard's foresight. He knew his daughter well, Thomas said simply. Now I've arranged a meeting with Amanda at my office tomorrow at 10. I'd like you to be there. Are you willing? For the first time in days, I felt a spark of my old self returning. The self that had partnered with Richard for 40 years. The the self that had raised a daughter and built a home, the self that deserved respect. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'll be there." Thomas smiled, not just professionally, but with genuine warmth. "Richard would be proud of you, Lauren. Oh, and one more thing. Bring those suitcases. You'll be going home tomorrow." As we finished our coffee, I asked the question that had been building since Thomas's revelations. Did Amanda really not read the will before acting? Thomas's laugh was unexpected and surprisingly hearty. "That's the irony, Lauren. For all her business acumen, Amanda made the classic mistake of assuming she knew everything without reading the fine print." His expression sobered. "Richard always said the most dangerous kind of arrogance is the kind that prevents you from doing your homework." I left the cafe with a strange mixture of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also sadness that Richard had felt the need to protect me from our own daughter, and genuine grief for the relationship with Amanda that now seemed more damaged than ever. Back at Patty's apartment, I opened Richard's letter in the privacy of the guest room. His familiar handwriting brought fresh tears. "My dearest Lauren, if you're reading this, then my fears about Amanda have proven justified, and for that, I'm deeply sorry. Our daughter has her strengths: intelligence, determination, ambition, but somewhere along the way, despite our best efforts, she missed the most important lessons about family and loyalty. I've structured my will to protect you while hopefully teaching Amanda the lesson she most needs to learn. The money and property mean nothing without the values we tried to instill in her. Perhaps losing it all might finally make that clear. Know that every day of our 40 years together was a gift to me. While I built a business that others admired, you built something far more valuable, a home filled with love. That was always the true wealth in our family, though I fear Amanda never understood that. Whatever happens with Amanda now, remember that you deserve respect and security. Don't let her or anyone else convince you otherwise. The provisions in my will are not charity. They are your rightful share of what we built together as partners in life. All my love, forever, Richard." I held the letter to my heart, feeling Richard's presence around me more strongly than at any time since his death. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, but tonight I could sleep knowing I wasn't alone in this fight after all. The next morning, I arrived at Thomas's office 15 minutes early, my stomach in knots, but my resolve strengthened by Richard's letter. Thomas greeted me warmly, ushering me into a conference room where a large screen had been set up. "Amanda will be here soon," he explained. "I've told her this is an emergency meeting regarding potential violations of the trust terms, but not the specifics." "Do you think she'll try to fight this?" I asked, smoothing my skirt nervously. Thomas gave me a reassuring smile. "She can try, but Richard's provisions are ironclad. I helped draft them myself." Right on time, the receptionist announced Amanda's arrival. She strode into the room with confident steps, dressed impeccably in a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to poorly concealed annoyance when she saw me. "Mother," she said with a curt nod, taking a seat as far from me as the conference table allowed. "Thomas, I was under the impression this was a private meeting about the trust." "This meeting concerns both of you," Thomas replied calmly, setting a thick folder on the table. "Amanda, it has come to my attention that you have asked your mother to leave the family residence. Is that correct?" Amanda's posture stiffened defensively. "The house is legally mine now. I have plans for the property that don't include maintaining it as a mausoleum to my father." Thomas's expression remained neutral. "And did you read the complete terms of your father's will before taking this action?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Amanda's face. "My legal team reviewed the relevant portions regarding asset transfer." "The relevant portions," Thomas repeated slowly. "I see. Then perhaps you're unaware of Section 17, Paragraph B of the trust document, which specifically addresses your mother's living arrangements. Amanda's confidence visibly wavered. Refresh my memory. Thomas opened the folder and began reading. The family residence at 1428 Oak Ridge Lane is to be held in trust with Amanda Bradford as primary beneficiary, subject to the lifetime residency rights of Lauren Bradford, who shall not be removed from said residence against her will for any reason whatsoever. Amanda's face paled slightly. There must be some provision for selling the property. Indeed there is, Thomas continued. The property may be sold only if Lauren Bradford is provided with alternative accommodation of equal or greater value in a location of her choosing, with all expenses including moving costs, redecorating, and any tax implications covered by the trust, not by Lauren personally. Amanda's fingers tapped an agitated rhythm on the table. Fine, I'll find Mother an equivalent condo. That would be her choice, not yours, Thomas corrected. But there's a more pressing matter. Section 23 outlines the behavioral expectations required of you as trustee and beneficiary. Behavioral expectations? Amanda repeated incredulously. Thomas nodded gravely. Your father included a moral conduct clause. The trust requires you to demonstrate, and I quote, respect and care befitting a daughter to her mother, including but not limited to ensuring her comfort, security, and dignity in all matters relating to her living situation and financial well-being. Amanda's expression darkened. That's subjectively unenforceable. Actually, it's not, Thomas countered, because your father anticipated potential disagreements about what constitutes respect and care. He recorded a video statement explaining his intentions to be referenced in case of any dispute. He gestured to the screen behind him. I believe we need to view that now. Before Amanda could object, Thomas pressed a button on a remote. Richard's face appeared on screen, recorded perhaps a month before his death. Though gaunt from illness, his eyes still held the sharp intelligence I had loved for 40 years. If this recording is being played, Richard began, his voice weaker than in health, but his words precise. Then Amanda has challenged or violated the provisions I've made for Lauren's security, and that deeply disappoints me. Amanda shifted uncomfortably in her chair as her father's recorded voice continued. Let me be absolutely clear about my intentions. Lauren and I built our life together as partners. While I was building Bradford Enterprises, Lauren was creating our home and raising our daughter. Work every bit as valuable as mine, though not measured in dollars. The assets I've accumulated belong to both of us morally, if not on paper. Richard's image leaned closer to the camera. Amanda, if you're watching this, you need to understand something fundamental. Your mother deserves your respect, not just because she raised you, but because she is an equal architect of the family wealth you're now benefiting from. Without her support, sacrifices, and partnership, there would be no inheritance for you at all. The recording continued with Richard explicitly outlining what would constitute violations of the trust, eviction or attempted eviction being specifically mentioned. He detailed the consequences: complete forfeiture of all assets to the secondary beneficiary. I hope this clarification is sufficient, Richard concluded. Amanda, I've always believed in your intelligence and potential. Now I need you to show wisdom as well. How you treat your mother when I'm gone will reveal your true character far more than any business success. As the screen went dark, silence filled the room. Amanda's face had lost all color, her expression a mixture of shock and dawning horror as the implications became clear. This can't be legally binding, she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. I assure you it is, Thomas replied. I've prepared a summary of precedent cases supporting moral conduct clauses in trusts. Additionally, your actions since your father's death, specifically the eviction and the documented statement to your mother to find somewhere else to die, constitute a clear violation of the terms. Amanda's head snapped up. How do you know I said that it's my word against hers? Thomas smiled thinly. Actually, your mother recorded your conversation on her phone on my advice. Richard instructed me to tell her to document any concerning interactions after his death. This was news to me. I had made no such recording, but I maintained a neutral expression as Amanda's eyes darted between us, calculating. What happens now? Amanda finally asked, her voice small. That depends, Thomas said, looking to me. Lauren, as the wronged party, you have options. We can immediately begin proceedings to transfer all assets to the secondary beneficiary based on Amanda's clear violations. Or, Amanda prompted anxiously. Or your mother might be willing to discuss terms for moving forward without triggering the forfeiture clause. Thomas finished. Lauren, what are your thoughts? All eyes turned to me. In that moment, I thought of Richard's letter of Amanda as a little girl who once adored me, of the complicated woman she had become, and of my own future. I don't want your money, Amanda, I said quietly. I never did. I just want my home and enough to live comfortably. Most importantly, I want my daughter back, though I realize that may not be possible anymore. Amanda's rigid posture seemed to collapse slightly. What are you suggesting? I'll move back into my home today, I stated firmly. You're welcome to stay there too. It's a big house, but only if you can treat me with basic respect. We'll need a formal agreement about financial support from the trust for my living expenses. And I think we should consider family counseling if there's any hope of salvaging our relationship. Amanda looked shocked at my directness, perhaps seeing me clearly for the first time in years, not as an accessory to her father's success or an obstacle to her inheritance, but as a woman with her own strength and dignity. And if I agree to this, she asked cautiously, then we don't trigger the forfeiture clause, I said simply. You remain the primary beneficiary of your father's estate with the understanding that the conditions he set must be honored fully going forward. Thomas nodded approvingly. I think that's more than generous considering the circumstances. Amanda stared at the table for a long moment, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the polished wood. When she looked up, I saw something I hadn't seen in her eyes for years: uncertainty and perhaps a glimmer of shame. I need to consult with my attorneys, she finally said. Of course, Thomas agreed. But be aware that the trust provisions are clear. Fighting this would only waste resources and likely end with the same outcome, or worse from your perspective. Amanda gathered her things slowly, her usual brisk efficiency absent. At the door, she paused, not quite meeting my eyes. I'll have my things moved to the guest wing until we figure things out. After she left, Thomas turned to me with an impressed expression. You handled that masterfully, Lauren. I sighed, the adrenaline draining away. I don't feel masterful. I feel sad that it came to this. Richard would be proud, Thomas assured me, patting my hand. Now let's get you home. 3 hours later, Patty dropped me off at my house again, with my 3 suitcases. Amanda's luxury car was in the driveway, but she remained upstairs as I settled back into the master bedroom. The real estate agent's signs and staging furniture had disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. That evening, a formal agreement drafted by Thomas was delivered by courier. Amanda had signed it, accepting all terms without contest. As I placed my signature next to hers, I wondered if this was victory or just the beginning of an even more difficult chapter. At dinner, Amanda and I sat at opposite ends of the dining table in uncomfortable silence. There was so much to say, but neither of us seemed to know where to begin. The days following my return home were filled with a tense, awkward coexistence. Amanda and I moved around each other like wary animals, careful to maintain distance and avoid direct confrontation. She spent most days working from the guest wing or at business meetings in the city, while I quietly reclaimed my spaces. The kitchen, the garden, the reading nook, in the living room Richard had designed specifically for me. A week after the meeting with Thomas, I found Amanda in Richard's office late one evening, Surrounded by stacks of financial documents, her laptop opened to spreadsheets filled with numbers that meant nothing to me. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes and her normally immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, hovering in the doorway, unsure of my welcome in this space that had been so exclusively Richard's domain. Amanda looked up, surprise evident on her face. Yes, actually. Thank you." It was the most civil exchange we'd had since my return. I brought her Earl Grey with a slice of lemon, her preferred way since childhood, and set it beside her laptop without comment. As I turned to leave, Amanda spoke hesitantly. "Mother, could I ask you something about Dad's business?" I paused, turning back. "I didn't have much involvement with the business side of things." "I know, but..." She gestured at the documents surrounding her. "I'm trying to understand some of his investment strategies, and there are gaps in the records. Did he ever talk to you about his approach to diversification?" The question surprised me. Actually, yes. Richard believed in balancing traditional investments with what he called human potential investments, smaller companies with strong leadership he personally believed in. I smiled faintly at the memory. He used to say numbers could tell you if a business was sound, but only looking someone in the eye could tell you if it had a future. Amanda stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. That actually explains a lot about these portfolio decisions. I couldn't make sense of why he'd take these particular risks. He took many risks that looked illogical on paper but paid off because he understood people. I said simply, then left her to her work, feeling a tiny shift in the atmosphere between us. The next morning, Thomas called with news. "Amanda's financial situation isn't what it appeared to be," he said without preamble. "I've been reviewing the complete trust accounts at her request." "What do you mean?" I asked, stepping onto the patio to speak privately. "She's in significant debt, Lauren. Despite her high-paying position, she's been living well beyond her means for years. Credit cards and underwater mortgage on her New York apartment, personal loans. She was counting on her inheritance to clear everything." The revelation stunned me. I had no idea. "Neither did Richard, apparently," Thomas continued. "Or if he did, he never mentioned it to me. It certainly explains her desperation to liquidate assets immediately." This new context cast Amanda's behavior in a different light, not excusing it, but perhaps explaining some of the panic behind her cruelty. I thanked Thomas and spent the morning thinking about what this meant for our fragile situation. That afternoon, I suggested something I never thought I would. "Amanda, I think we should consider family counseling." She looked up from her laptop at the kitchen island, defensive. "Why? Because you think I'm mentally unstable for wanting my inheritance." I chose my words carefully. "Because we've lost the ability to communicate as mother and daughter, and I think we both need help finding our way back. If that's something you want too." To my surprise, after a long silence, she nodded once. "Fine, set it up." Dr. Eleanor Winters, a family therapist Thomas recommended, agreed to see us the following week. Her office was neutral territory, a peaceful space with comfortable chairs and no history between us. Those first sessions were painful, filled with recriminations and defensiveness on Amanda's part, and hurt on mine. But gradually, under Dr. Winters' skilled guidance, we began to unpack decades of misunderstandings and unspoken expectations. "I always felt I had to be perfect," Amanda admitted during our fourth session. "Dad set the bar so high with his success. Nothing I did ever seemed enough." "We never meant to pressure you," I said, surprised. "We were proud of you no matter what." Amanda laughed bitterly. "Really, Dad talked constantly about legacy and carrying on what he built. And you were always the perfect wife and mother, making everything look effortless." "Effortless," I echoed in disbelief. "Amanda, I struggled every day. I second-guessed every decision I made as your mother. These revelations were painful but necessary, laying bare the gap between our perceptions and reality, Doctor. Winters helped us see how Richard's drive for success, while well-intentioned, had created impossible standards for Amanda, and how my decision to make parenting look seamless had inadvertently set an unattainable example. In our 6th session, Amanda finally broke down. "I'm in serious financial trouble," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "I've been living on credit for years, trying to maintain the lifestyle I thought Dad would want for me, trying to prove I was successful too." The truth emerged in painful detail. How Amanda's drive to appear successful had led to increasingly risky financial decisions culminating in a gambling problem disguised as investment strategies. Her apartment, her clothes, her entire New York life was a facade maintained through mounting debt. "I thought Dad's inheritance would solve everything," she admitted. "When I saw it was going to take longer to access the funds than I expected, I panicked. I have creditors threatening legal action. I couldn't afford to wait through a long transition period." Understanding bloomed within me. Not justification for her cruelty, but context that made sense of her desperation. "Why didn't you tell us you were struggling? How could I?" Amanda looked away. "Dad built an empire from nothing. I couldn't admit I was failing with every advantage he never had." For the first time, I truly saw the burden Richard's success had placed on our daughter. Not intentionally, but inevitably. The weight of living up to a brilliant self-made man had crushed her under expectations she felt she could never meet. That evening at home, I made a decision. "Amanda," I said, as we sat in the living room, the space between us feeling less vast than before. "I think it's time I took a more active role in understanding the family finances." She looked up from her phone warily. "What do you mean?" "I've arranged a meeting with Thomas and the trust administrators tomorrow. I'd like you to join me." The next day changed everything. As Thomas walked us through the trust structure Richard had established, I asked questions, took notes, and demonstrated a level of financial acumen that visibly surprised Amanda. "You understand all this?" she asked during a break. "I was married to your father for 40 years, I reminded her gently. We discussed everything, including his business decisions. I chose not to be formally involved in the company, but that doesn't mean I wasn't paying attention. With Thomas's guidance, we developed a plan to address Amanda's financial troubles using resources from the trust without violating its terms. It would require discipline and significant lifestyle changes for Amanda, but it offered a path forward that preserved her dignity and our relationship. As we worked together on this plan over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. Amanda began to see me differently. Not as an extension of her father, not as an obstacle to her inheritance, but as a person with my own strengths and wisdom. Gradually, our conversations extended beyond finances to other aspects of life. Amanda admitted her job in New York made her miserable. I shared my regrets about not maintaining my own career after having her. We found common ground in unexpected places. A shared love of mystery novels, a mutual dislike of social events that felt performative rather than genuine. 6 months after my brief exile and dramatic return home, Amanda and I sat together in the garden I had cultivated for decades. The roses were in full bloom, their scent filling the air as evening approached. "I've been thinking," Amanda said, setting aside her tablet where she'd been reviewing business proposals. "Dad's company has been without clear leadership since he died. The management team is capable, but they lack vision." I nodded, unsure where she was heading. "I'm considering moving back permanently to take a more active role," she continued. "But I'd want your input. You understood Dad's philosophy better than anyone." The request touched me deeply. "I'd be happy to help however I can." Amanda looked at me directly, something she'd struggled to do since our confrontation. Actually, I was thinking we might work together. You have insights I lack, and frankly, you're better with people than I am. Dad always said relationships were the foundation of his success. Work together? I echoed, surprised. Amanda, I've never been part of the business world. She smiled, a genuine smile that reminded me of the little girl who used to run to me with scraped knees and treasured findings. Neither had Dad when he started. He learned, and so can you. If you want to, that is. That conversation marked the beginning of an unexpected new chapter in my life. At 62, I found myself learning the intricacies of the business Richard had built, discovering aptitudes I never knew I possessed. Amanda and I established a rhythm of collaboration that played to our respective strengths, her analytical mind and my people skills, creating a balance that reminded company veterans of how Richard had operated. A year after Richard's death, Bradford Enterprises was thriving under our joint guidance. More importantly, Amanda and I had found a new relationship. Not the uncomplicated mother-daughter bond of her childhood, but something more complex, and in many ways stronger. Built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and hard-won understanding. One autumn afternoon, we visited Richard's grave together, placing fresh flowers against the simple headstone he had requested. He would be proud of us, Amanda said softly. Not because of the business success, but because we found our way back to being family. I squeezed her hand, thinking of how far we'd come. The money never mattered to him as much as people did. I think he structured his will the way he did because he knew what we both really needed wasn't financial security, but each other. Amanda nodded, wiping away a tear. I was so focused on the inheritance, I nearly lost something much more valuable. As we walked back to the car together, I reflected on the strange journey grief had taken us on, through betrayal and reconciliation loss and rediscovery. Richard's death had nearly destroyed our family, but ultimately, through his foresight and our own hard work, it had transformed it into something new and unexpectedly beautiful. The money was still there, the house still stood, but what constituted our true wealth had fundamentally changed. No longer measured in millions or property, but in the renewed bond between mother and daughter, the shared purpose we had found, and the knowledge that we could face whatever came next, together. It's been 5 years since Richard passed away, and our family nearly shattered beyond repair. As I sit in the garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, I can't help but marvel at how differently things turned out than I initially feared. Bradford Enterprises continues to thrive under our joint leadership. Amanda handles the financial and strategic aspects, while I focus on client relationships and our charitable foundation, the Richard Bradford Memorial Fund, which provides college scholarships to underprivileged students. It turns out I have a talent for fundraising and public speaking that no one, least of all myself, ever suspected. The house remains our home, though we've made some changes together that honor both Richard's memory and our current needs. The formal dining room, where we once hosted business dinners, is now a comfortable meeting space where employees can brainstorm in a relaxed environment. Richard's office has been preserved largely as it was, but now contains photographs of both of us alongside his business awards. Amanda still maintains her apartment in New York, but spends most of her time here. Our relationship continues to evolve. Sometimes we disagree, occasionally old patterns resurface, but we've learned to communicate honestly instead of letting resentments build. We respect each other as women and as business partners, not just as mother and daughter. One of the most surprising developments has been Amanda's personal growth. Once she addressed her financial troubles and gambling issues through therapy and support groups, she discovered that much of her desperate materialism had been an attempt to fill an emotional void. Now she channels her father's business acumen toward more meaningful pursuits, focusing on sustainable investments and mentoring young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The most valuable lesson we both learned through our ordeal was about the true nature of wealth. Richard left behind $33 million, but his real legacy was the wisdom embedded in how he structured his will, forcing us to confront the breakdown in our relationship and rebuild something stronger. I've come to believe that Richard knew exactly what he was doing. He understood that Amanda's drive for independence and success had disconnected her from the values he held most dear, and that my own enabling patterns had contributed to the problem. His will wasn't just about distributing assets, it was his final attempt to heal his family. Patty remains my closest friend, though now we meet for lunch or theater outings rather than emergency housing. She likes to remind me how far Amanda and I have come, especially when we hit rough patches. "Remember when she kicked you out?" she'll say with characteristic bluntness. "And now look at you two running a company together." Thomas Parker still serves as our attorney and has become something of a family friend, joining us for holiday dinners and offering sage advice on matters both legal and personal. He confessed to me once that Richard had spent months perfecting the terms of his will, determined to create a document that would protect me while giving Amanda the opportunity to become her best self. "He never lost faith in either of you," Thomas told me. Even when he worried about Amanda's values, he believed in her capacity to grow. That faith has been vindicated in ways I never could have imagined during those dark days after Richard's death. The daughter who once told me to find somewhere else to die now seeks my input on important decisions and values my perspective. The woman who once felt useless now sits on multiple boards and is recognized as a community leader in her own right. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Amanda had actually read the will before acting so rashly. Would we have avoided the pain and confrontation? Perhaps, but I'm not certain we would have reached the depth of understanding and reconciliation that grew from that crisis. Sometimes it takes nearly losing everything to recognize what truly matters. For those of you facing family conflicts over inheritance or struggling with grief that brings out the worst rather than the best in those you love, I hope our story offers some measure of hope. The path to healing isn't easy or straightforward, but it's possible with honesty, professional help when needed, and the courage to face difficult truths about ourselves and those we love. Richard once told me that business success came from seeing opportunities where others saw only problems. In the end, that philosophy served our family as well as it served his company. What looked like the destruction of our mother-daughter relationship became the opportunity to build something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more satisfying for both of us. And that, I believe, is the inheritance he truly wanted to leave us. Not millions in a bank account, but the chance to find our way back to each other and forward to become our best selves. In that sense, we are wealthier now than we ever were before. Have you ever experienced a family conflict that ultimately brought you closer together? Or have you found yourself reconnecting with a loved one after a painful estrangement? Please share your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of family healing and personal growth. Remember that sometimes what looks like the end of everything is actually just the beginning of something new and beautiful. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to rebuild whatever in your life needs healing.